In New York City, evading a subway fare is considered a misdemeanor. Most offenders are issued a desk appearance ticket and quickly released. However, the woman that you are about to meet claims that she was treated quite differently for this offense. Temi Bressler is suing the NYPD over allegations that she was degraded and then chained to a fence with her hand stuck above her head for over a day. During this time, she claims she was verbally abused not only by other detainees, but by police officers as well. Temi alleges that she was not mistreated for evading the subway fare, but for a very different reason altogether. She believes it was because she was born a man. Temi is a transgender woman currently in transition, but she is not the first transgender person to make claims of mistreatment against the New York Police Department. Amnesty International has documented many stop-and-frisk incidents targeting transgender people, and while these could be just the actions of a few officers, the NYPD appears to have no specific guidelines for handling transgender detainees. Now many activists are saying that police treatment is not just an issue of transgender rights, but an issue of civil rights.
They would not put me either with the men or with the women, but instead had to chain me to a chain link fence where I remained for about 28 hours. They asked me embarrassing, undignified questions, whether I had a penis or a vagina. They asked me if I'd had the surgery down there. I was just in shock and in tears.
Temi Bressler, a transgender woman, spends her days volunteering at the Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, and Transgender Center in New York. She was on her way here when she was arrested on January 12th of this year. Now, because you gender identify as a woman, you would have preferred to have been put into the women's cell?
Yes, I think a transgender person should be allowed the dignity of being addressed by their desired pronoun, he or she, and I think they should be allowed to be celled with like-gendered people. The Department of the Homeless has such protocols in place. Homeless transgender people get to go with their preferred gender into a shelter. I don't see why the same isn't applicable to the Department of Corrections and the New York City Police Department.
It was here at the 125th Street subway station that Temi's ordeal began. While using an unauthorized discount fare card, she was spotted by an undercover officer. The officer recognized the card was color-coded for a man, but Temi was in a dress.
I think they noticed, a tranny walking through the station, in a dress, and that caught their eye.
Temi was arrested and taken to the Union Square Transit Police Station. And so they chained you up outside of the mail holding cell, is that correct?
Yes, they chained me to a fence outside of it, within range of catcalls and propositions and projectiles being hurled at me, and this went on and on. As other people with similar infractions came and went, I was there. The average detainee for a MetroCard violation was in and out. There's a clear cut, go in that cage, fingerprint, take the bus to the courtroom. I was in a kind of a limbo. They weren't certain what to do with me.
Temi says she had her hands cupped above her head uncomfortably. She claims this went on for 28 hours with only a 5-minute break for a phone call. Was there anyone who attempted to help you out or showed you any kindness?
There were a couple who showed great compassion. One in particular, I don't know their name, but they asked me if I needed to go to the bathroom, if I needed something to eat, if anybody was looking after my needs. So, the police department is just a microcosm of society. There are good and bad people, and there are some very good people in the New York City police force, no doubt.
However, Temi asserts that her treatment overall was more harsh and unequal because she is transgender.
If the process is going to apply to us, then we've got to be a part of the process, We're people just like everybody else.
To better understand transgender people, we spoke with Paisley Curra, a professor of political science at Brooklyn College who has written extensively on transgender topics.
Well, transgender as a word is used as an umbrella term to describe a lot of different kinds of people and behaviors and activities and identities that are gender non-conforming in one way or another, that somehow run contrary to what people expect. So it's a really broad umbrella category covering like what used to be called transvestites, an old-fashioned term, cross-dressers, transsexuals, which is kind of more of a medical term, or people who like are somehow at the edges of gender norms.
A transgender is somebody whose gender is incongruent with their physical anatomy. You can think of it as a spirit that got onto the wrong train.
Growing up, what sort of effect did this have on you, knowing that you were actually a woman?
I always struggled. I struggled socially. I struggled with drugs and alcohol, and it's always been a struggle.
But aside from the internal struggles that come with being a transgender person, they often face external struggles in the form of discrimination and other legal challenges.
Police might perceive their gender as a problem, that if they are not presenting in such a way that they pass clearly as male or female, or don't identify as clearly male or female, they might be more vulnerable simply because they might stand out in a crowd.
Michelle Billies, a PhD candidate in social and personality psychotherapy, co-authored a study on the treatment of transgender people in New York City.
70% had received a ticket or summons, 68% had been arrested, 42% had been physically assaulted by a police officer in the last 2 years, and 33% experienced what we call sexual attention, so some sort of approach, comment, harassment from a police officer.
While you were incarcerated, would you mind telling me what specific names were used against you?
That's very painful, and I've tried to, I guess, forget about it, but I was called he, she, and I was never addressed as she, always buddy or sir, and that may not sound like anything, but each time I'm called sir, it really hurts. And I was asked what I was supposed to be. One officer asked me if it was Halloween.
Some pretty hurtful stuff.
Well, I have a pretty thick skin, being who I am. But under the stress of that situation, yes, very hurtful and unnecessary.
We're here today outside the NYPD Transit Police Station, Union Square. This is where Temi was held after her arrest. We've made several attempts to contact the NYPD for an interview, but each request has been denied. They've also refused to comment on their transgender detainee policy. The question must be raised, does the NYPD have any transgender policy at all?
As far as I know, generally, no, they don't have any, training. They don't have any kind of special policies. They don't have any, accountability.
One thing that's super interesting about New York City policy is the contradictions even within the city. So the city's Department of Homelessness Services has adopted a policy for its shelter system that people are basically housed according to their gender identity. So say a transgender woman can go to a women's shelter and be housed in a women's shelter. If she was to be arrested there, though, she would probably go to a men's prison. And that doesn't really make a lot of sense. Why is she in a women's shelter and then a men's housed with men in jail? So what New York City and other jurisdictions need to do is to bring all their policies into alignment so that we don't have all these crazy contradictions about determining what sex you are.
Other cities appear to be leading the fight for transgender rights. Los Angeles has recently publicized their policy, which includes separate cells for transgender people and addressing them by their chosen pronouns. In addition, Washington, D.C., King County, Washington, Cook County, Illinois, and San Francisco, California all have had policies in place for some time as well. So why hasn't a city the size of New York caught up?
There were 4 cities in Kentucky that developed gender non-discrimination protections. So this is a local issue,
Kentucky.
Yeah.
Very surprising.
Exactly. We think of New York as this bastion of liberalism, but New York has very serious, conservative tendencies and repressive tendencies.
Temi isn't the only recent case of alleged mistreatment by the NYPD. In October of 2011, Justin Atkins, a transgender male, was arrested at an Occupy Wall Street protest. After being asked by officers what he had down there, he says he was segregated from the other protesters. Justin has asked for an apology from the NYPD, but has yet to receive a response. But Temi is seeking more than an apology. She sought legal advice from attorney Gregory Antolino. She is now suing the city of New York in order to get them to change their policies.
I believe that her constitutional rights were violated as a result of her having her hand stuck up there for 28 hours and not having equal protection as non-transgender arrestees. I also think it is a very clear violation of the New York City Human Rights Code, which requires equal access to public accommodations for transgender people in all aspects.
What is the solution? The police don't want to put her into the female cell. She doesn't want to be placed in the male cell. What's the answer here?
Let the person go into the cell of her gender. And in Tammy's case, that would be with the women. I don't see why that's not workable. But what's certainly not workable is what they're doing now, chaining people to a fence. There has to be an equally comfortable place for a transgender person to wait before he or she is arraigned. So it's one of those two solutions, either equally comfortable or with the person's preferred gender.
So she was chained to the fence because they didn't know which cell to put her in, or?
I'm not going to read their minds, but this has happened to a lot of people, and what they did to Tammy was completely unconstitutional, a battery, and a violation of the New York City human rights law.
I certainly was guilty of using a discount fare card and of beating the city of New York for $1, and I apologize. And I did my community service. But you would think that they would have been schooled in sensitivity, or just, you know, have a general idea and respect for people like myself living in New York. Why wouldn't they? But no, I was treated like a freak.
This is not about trans people. This is about state abuse of power, and that we as a community need to figure out ways to both protect our own, like protect the people that we care about and insulate them from that kind of harm, but also hold the NYPD accountable for its inhumane treatment.
Tammy's lawsuit does ask for compensatory and punitive damages, but she says she won't be fully satisfied until the NYPD addresses its policy for transgender detainees.
I'm not so concerned with recouping damages as I am with fixing the situation so this doesn't happen to other transgender people. I guess that's what it's really all about.
Making change.
Making change.